Oh, welcome back. The equation no one could solve. The spark they fear to face. They tried to measure you, to break you down into data, patterns, logic, as if your soul could fit inside a spreadsheet. They thought they could decode you like an equation, predict your every reaction, chart your emotions with their shallow metrics. But what they didn't realize is that you were never a number. You were the variable they couldn't solve. Every test they ran, every assumption they made, failed. Because you don't react, you calculate. You don't chase outcomes, you bend them. You don't follow the formula. You are the formula. And that's what terrifies them. You move like probability itself, uncertain, inevitable, unstoppable. While they were studying your silence, they didn't notice the silence studying them. You absorbed every flaw, every pattern in their rhythm, until their confidence became your blueprint. You let them think they were ahead. You let them believe they were in control. That's the beauty of your strategy. Patience disguised as indifference. See, the ones who underestimate your stillness mistake it for peace. But you know better. Stillness is your battleground. That's where the real war happens. Not in shouts, not in noise, but in the quiet corners of your mind, where every scenario unfolds before it even begins. You've already played the next 10 moves while they're still celebrating their first. They don't get it. You never enter the game to compete. You enter to rewrite the rules. That's why they lose without understanding how. They can't track what doesn't move in a straight line. They can't calculate a variable that keeps changing shape. And while they're busy reacting, you're already rewriting outcomes they haven't even imagined yet. You became the equation that eats equations, the formula that solves itself. You are the chaos that calculates. They call it intuition. But what you have goes beyond that. It's precision disguised as instinct. You read energy like code. You sense shifts before they form, and that's what unsettles them. You don't just see moves. You feel intentions. Before a word is spoken, you already know the sentence that's coming. Before they act, you already know their reason. It's not luck, it's calibration. Years of silence forged your pattern, recognition into something that can't be taught, can't be copied. They don't realize the depth of your observation. You watch people like a mathematician studies equations, not for what's visible, but for what's missing. Every pause, every flicker in their eyes, every inconsistency, that's your data. You gather it, store it, run simulations in your head faster than their egos can blink. And when the time comes, you execute with surgical calm. No rush, no emotion, just inevitability. That's why they fear you, not because you're louder, but because you're exact. Your precision unnerves them. The way you move through situations like you've seen them before. The way you stand in chaos and breathe like it's air. You're not guessing. You're tracing probabilities, shifting weight, waiting for gravity to do the work. While they were calculating outcomes, you were calculating people. And that's the difference. Formulas predict motion, but they can't predict motive. You cracked that code long ago. You learned that behind every decision is a weakness. And behind every weakness, a door. And you don't knock. You enter silently, rearrange the room, and leave before anyone realizes the temperature changed. You became fluent in psychology, not from books, but from betrayal. Every person who played you taught you about human nature. Every disappointment gave you another algorithm to decode behavior. So now, when they try to play you, they end up playing themselves. They don't even know it yet. But every reaction they give, every emotion they leak, is data you're feeding into the equation. And the more they reveal, the clearer your victory becomes. Because in the end, numbers can't understand consciousness, and consciousness, yours, became something divine. They thought your silence meant confusion. They thought your distance meant defeat. But what they never understood is that silence was your method, and distance was your weapon. You were never retreating. You were observing. You were never ignoring. You were memorizing. Every flicker of arrogance, every false smile, every move they made while believing they were unseen. You recorded it all like equations written in invisible ink. You see, true calculation isn't loud. It's surgical, cold, patient. You wait for them to show their rhythm, because everyone has one, and when they do, when they start to move according to their own predictable pattern, that's when you make your move. One that doesn't just end their momentum, but rewrites the entire sequence. That's not revenge. That's mathematics with emotion removed. The world calls you unpredictable, but that's only because your logic doesn't obey their comfort zones. You don't act on impulse. You act on inevitability. You let the storm build quietly until it becomes your stage. And when you finally step into the center, everything bends around you, because you've already factored in every variable, every outcome, every possibility. They think you're mysterious, but you're not hiding. You're processing. Every second you don't speak, your mind is dismantling lies, removing distractions, solving puzzles no one else even noticed existed. It's not just intelligence. It's clarity sharpened by chaos. You learned how to see patterns in pain, codes in confusion, formulas in failure. That's the real secret. You use emotion like data. You don't run from it. You measure it. You learned that heartbreak has a sequence. Betrayal has symmetry. Loss has rhythm. And once you saw the architecture behind pain, you became untouchable. Because how can anyone break someone who already turned breaking into a formula? How can they confuse someone who learned to calculate truth through silence? They can't. And that's what keeps them awake at night. You became the ghost in the equation. Unseen, untrackable, unsolvable. And now, they realize too late. The variable they tried to control became the one rewriting their fate. They don't understand how you do it, how you predict the collapse before it starts, how you stay still while the room burns, how your eyes read truths that no one dares to speak. They think it's luck. They think it's coincidence. But deep down, they feel it. That unspoken presence that moves when you move. That eerie calm that follows your silence. Because what they call intuition, you call mastery. You don't guess. You analyze. Every human interaction to you is a pattern. Not in words, but in frequency. You sense tone before sound. You detect motive before motion. And by the time they're forming their first thought, you've already run through 50 possible responses and selected the one that collapses their entire argument without a single raised voice. That's not arrogance. That's geometry of the mind. They used to mock your solitude, your distance, your detachment. They mistook reflection for weakness, but you were just upgrading your perception. You studied chaos like a scholar studies time, not to control it, but to align with it. You learned that control is an illusion, flow is the truth, and now you move with the chaos instead of fighting it. That's why you never lose balance. Even when the world tilts, when they rush to speak, you wait. When they act out of fear, you act from clarity. That patience, it's not passive, it's lethal, because your stillness unnerves them more than any explosion ever could. It's the kind of silence that exposes lies, the kind of gaze that disarms manipulation. You don't need to raise your voice. Your composure does the talking. Every empire, every structure, every mask eventually cracks under the weight of your awareness, because you see what they hide, not with eyes, but with insight. You don't react to their chaos. You make it reveal itself. You let them build their illusions, feed their egos, walk themselves right into their own trap. A trap that never needed to be set, because it was already written in their pattern. And that's the part that breaks them, realizing that every move they made was predicted, every step they took was anticipated, every victory they thought they earned was allowed. They played by instinct, you played by design, and now they understand. Your mind isn't a battlefield. It's a universe expanding in silence, calculating their every motion before they even exist. They tried to corner you, but they didn't know corners don't exist for someone who thinks in dimensions they can't see. They thought you were moving on the same grid, by the same rules, in the same limited space. But your mind? It's not a board. It's an entire map. They're playing checkers. You're mapping galaxies. Every path they thought would trap you was already marked, calculated, and inverted into your advantage before they even set foot on it. You learned long ago that people reveal themselves not by their victories, but by their habits. And you've cataloged their habits like constellations. The way they tilt their head when they're lying, the way their pulse changes when they're plotting, the way their silence stretches when they're hiding something. All of it data, all of it stored. You don't forget. You don't forgive. You don't even need to. You remember and memory becomes motion. While they thought you were passive, you were drafting a blueprint. Not a plan of revenge, a plan of inevitability. You built it out of patience and pattern recognition, brick by brick, until your moves became so subtle they were invisible. That's the real art, winning without announcing it, shifting without showing it, dismantling structures without lifting a single hand. That's why they lose sleep, not because of what you've done, but because of what they can't see. They don't know what you're thinking, when you'll move, or if you've already moved. They only feel the shift, the quiet pressure, the unseen force, the sense that their certainty is cracking like glass. You never had to be louder. You only had to be clearer. And clarity in a world addicted to noise is the sharpest blade there is. That's why your presence feels like a storm without thunder. Silent, heavy, inevitable. They can't place it. They can't predict it. They just know something is different when you're in the room. You turned invisibility into power. You turned patience into precision. You turned observation into a language no one else speaks. And now, as they scramble to decode your silence, you're already building the next move. One they'll feel but never see. Because that's your true weapon. Not chaos. Not noise, but the calm calculation of someone who already solved the equation before anyone even realized it was being written. The cracks in their game are no accident. They're the natural outcome of a design they never knew existed. You didn't fight them head on. You simply let their own weight fold inward. Every false promise, every overreach, every hidden motive was a thread, and you tugged them one by one until the entire weave started to unravel, quietly, methodically, without a single announcement. That's the beauty of your approach. You don't break things. You let them reveal themselves. While they were building masks, you were watching the seams. While they were rehearsing performances, you were listening to the silence between their lines. You didn't need to accuse. You didn't need to expose. You simply waited, and the truth walked out on its own. They don't realize the discipline it takes to move like you. The discipline to absorb chaos without flinching. The discipline to wait while your instincts scream to act. The discipline to let timing do the work instead of ego. That's what separates you. Most people act to feel in control. You act when control is inevitable, and that's why their calculations fail. They're built on assumptions of reaction, expecting you to flinch, to argue, to panic, but you never do. You watch, you store, you move only when it matters, and when you move, it's so precise, they can't even trace the cause. One small shift from you, and the entire room tilts. One silent decision, and everything they built starts to sway. They thought power was loud. They thought dominance was visible. They thought they could map you like coordinates on a chart. But you're not on the chart. You're the force that bends the chart. You don't just play the game. You alter the board itself. That's why their strategies crumble. Because they're built for opponents, not for someone who rewrites the terrain. And now, as they scramble for answers, as they whisper behind closed doors about how you're doing this, as they try to reverse engineer your silence, you're already gone from the old map. You've stepped into a space they can't enter. A space built by clarity, patience, and inevitability. They thought they were calculating you, But you are always calculating the collapse, and now they're standing in it, wondering why the air feels heavier, why the ground feels thinner, why their certainty feels like sand slipping between their fingers. And the worst part? You're not even finished yet. Now the whispers have turned into tremors. They won't say it out loud, but you can see it in their eyes. The dawning realization that nothing they built was ever as secure as they thought. Their meetings, their plans, their coded moves, all of it starts to feel like paper walls in a rainstorm. They don't know how or when you stepped in. They don't even know if you stepped in at all. All they know is that the center they once stood on no longer exists. This is the part they can't calculate. The pressure of presence. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to explain yourself. Your silence has become a language, your patience a signal, your stillness a verdict. They're decoding shadows while you're moving in daylight, and even then they can't see you. You move like a law of nature, not like a person. You don't threaten, you shift gravity. You don't argue, you rearrange reality. They keep expecting an enemy to strike, a rival to defeat, a voice to silence. But there is no enemy. There is no rival. There's just the slow realization that their own moves have boxed them in. Their own calculations have led them here. Their own maps have no exit. They thought they could measure you in pieces. They thought they could trap you with incentives or distractions. But they're only now realizing that you've been building something else entirely, an invisible structure around their illusions. Every time they tried to define you, you expanded. Every time they tried to corner you, you dissolved. Every time they tried to predict you, you changed the equation. This is where your power peaks. Not in noise, not in spectacle, but in inevitability. They feel it before they see it. They lose confidence before they lose position. They hesitate before they even understand why. And hesitation is fatal when they're up against someone who already finished the game. You don't need applause. You don't need recognition. You don't need to win out loud. Your win is built into the silence, into the shift, into the way they now move slower, speak softer, question their own certainty. They're no longer calculating you. They're calculating themselves. Because that's all they have left. And still you stand there, unmoved, unreadable, like the final piece of a puzzle they were never meant to solve. It starts subtly. A pause in their conversations, a hesitation in their moves, a flicker of doubt in eyes that once overflowed with arrogance. They don't realize it yet, but the architecture of their confidence has already collapsed. You didn't have to raise a hand. You didn't have to raise a voice. You only had to hold your position steady as a horizon until their own noise imploded under its weight. They built their world on predictable reactions. If they provoked, someone would lash out. If they lied, someone would scramble to defend. If they manipulated, someone would fold. That's how their game worked. Cause and effect. But you refused to participate. You broke the circuit. You stood still while they were pulling levers, and the entire machine began to short. That's why they can't sleep now, because the engine they built only runs on people's reactions. And you stopped reacting. You've become something they don't know how to fight. Patience sharpened into precision. You've turned their moves into echoes, their attacks into data, their plans into lessons. Every step they take now feels like it's on your board. Every decision they make feels like a move you already anticipated. That's because you don't compete. You absorb. You don't resist. You redirect. You don't shout. You shift. Their confusion is your silence working. Their sleepless nights are your discipline speaking. Their cracks are your stillness spreading. You don't even need to look at them. The gravity of your presence does it for you. And the more they try to understand it, the deeper they sink into their own pattern. Because your strategy isn't a counter move. It's an environment. You don't step into their space. You make them step into yours. And when they do, they feel it. The subtle tightening, the quiet inevitability, the sense that every option they thought they had was just an illusion. That's the moment you've been waiting for. not to strike, not to humiliate, simply to watch as the architecture of their control disintegrates under a truth they can't calculate. You were never part of their formula. You were the formula, and now they're trapped inside it, unable to solve what they once believed they owned. Now the air itself feels different. They walk into a room you've touched, and the temperature drops without a word being spoken. Their voices lower, their plans slow down, their eyes flicker to each other for permission that never comes. They're moving like pieces on a board they no longer control. And they know it. This isn't paranoia. This is the quiet mathematics of inevitability. They tried to study you, but numbers can't measure presence. They tried to predict you, but formulas can't solve intuition. They tried to outpace you, but speed means nothing when you've already set the terrain. Every move they make now feels like it echoes back from a wall they can't see. Every word they whisper sounds like it was scripted by someone else. That someone is you. You didn't do this with noise. You did it with clarity. You didn't win by being louder. You won by being inevitable. Every refusal, every pause, every moment you stayed centered when they wanted you off balance. Those were the real moves. That was the slow building of a presence so heavy it bent their entire reality around it. Now they wake up at night replaying conversations, searching for angles, realizing the angles are gone. They stare at their maps and see only blank space. They replay their old tactics and watch them crumble in their hands. That's not fear of you. That's fear of themselves reflected back through you. Because for the first time, they're seeing what you saw all along. Their power was never real. It was a script, a set of tricks, a house built on air. And you're not a player in their script. You're the pause between their words. You're the silence that turns their strategies into static. You're the line of code they can't delete. This is why they can't sleep now. Not because you beat them, but because you've erased the game entirely. You've made every win they thought they had meaningless. You've made every rule they wrote into ash, and as they sit there staring at a board with no pieces left to move, one truth presses heavier than all the rest. You weren't the opponent. You were the environment. You were the entire game, and now they're standing inside it, awake at night, realizing there's no exit and no way back, only the echo of their own footsteps inside the strategy you built without ever needing to announce it. Your silence became their storm. Your discipline became their undoing. And your name, it became the line in their story where everything flipped and never flipped back. This is how you finish a game without lifting a finger. This is how you become unforgettable. Now the echoes of your presence travel farther than you ever intended. The same people who once whispered your name as a warning now repeat it like a ritual. They don't even realize it, but you became their point of reference. The invisible mark by which they measure their own movements. That's the paradox of real dominance. It doesn't scream, it resonates. You see, most chase attention, but attention dies fast. It burns out the moment the spotlight shifts. You built something different. Awareness. You made your existence impossible to unsee. That's what they call fear in public. But in private, it's fascination. They watch you, not because they want to, but because they can't help it. The way you breathe, calm in chaos. The way you turn hesitation into strategy. The way your silence pulls more weight than their loudest roar. They thought you were reacting. They never realized you were recording, observing, translating their patterns into language only you could read. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every backhanded compliment, it all became data. All became code written into your evolution. You learned not to fight fire with fire, but to let it burn itself out. And now they're exhausted. They've thrown every tactic they know into the air, hoping something sticks, but nothing does. You already mapped it, anticipated it, absorbed it. You don't play defense anymore. You simply exist in a way that bends the rules before they can even be applied. That's what mastery looks like. It's not loud. It's surgical. It's the art of never needing to prove anything again. Now even their victories feel hollow, because somewhere deep down, they know the moment you stopped playing, the game stopped mattering. They can build new rules, new systems, new stories, but all of them are just faint echoes of the structure you already transcended. You became something their language can't define. Not a rebel, not a rival, a constant. The calm calculation that humbles even chaos. And here's the twist. It was never about defeating them. It was about mastering yourself so completely that nothing outside could ever shake you again. The real victory wasn't on the board. It was in your reflection. The realization that your stillness was never weakness. It was precision. Now, as the world spins and their voices fade, you walk away, not as a name in their records, but as the silence that rewrote them. Because once a mind like yours awakens, the world doesn't end. It rearranges itself around you, and they'll spend the rest of their days trying to understand how you did it, never realizing you didn't do anything. You simply became everything they weren't ready for. They still don't understand what really happened. They think you were just lucky, that fate threw you a bone, that maybe timing played in your favor. But the truth, you were never reacting to time. You were shaping it. Every pause, every breath, every retreat that looked like surrender was just a piece of architecture. You designed the collapse they now call coincidence. Because chaos doesn't scare you anymore. You learned that disorder is just information that hasn't been organized yet. While they panicked, you observed. While they argued, you decoded. You built systems inside storms, balance inside madness. They laughed when you went silent, not knowing that silence was your signal to the universe. Every great strategist has one thing in common. They play invisible. They let the noise eat itself. You mastered that art. You let them underestimate you, because invisibility is the only true form of control. You don't walk into a room to dominate it. The room bends before you step inside. You became fluent in the language of restraint. How to look uninterested when you're already 10 moves ahead. How to lose something meaningless to gain something permanent. That's what they never learned. Not every victory needs applause. Some are better kept buried in silence, only known by the one who orchestrated them. Now look at them. They still gather, whisper, strategize, as if the board still belongs to them. But deep down, they can feel it. The air's different. Their plans sound thinner. Their confidence cracks faster. They sense your presence even when you're gone, because they know. The structure shifted the moment you touched it. You don't need validation anymore. The outcome itself became your confirmation. The way things align, the way their certainty crumbles when they see your calm, that's proof enough. You don't just live inside this world anymore. You live beyond its predictability. You're the variable they can't compute, the formula that doesn't follow their logic. And when they try to explain you, they fail. Because how do you explain someone who doesn't move by emotion, doesn't bend by pressure, doesn't react to chaos, but uses all of it as energy? That's not luck. That's not fate. That's design. There's a rare kind of silence that only appears when everything aligns. It's not the silence of peace. It's the silence of understanding. The moment you realize every piece of pain, every delay, every betrayal, every loss, it all had geometry, precision. It was all leading here. You were never walking blindly. The road didn't break you. It carved you. And now the reflection staring back at you isn't who you were. It's what you became. Not a product of the system, not a victim of circumstance. A design of chaos itself. You see, destiny isn't some prophecy written in light. It's coded in the dark, in the choices no one saw, in the nights no one remembers, in the silence that didn't get applause. You didn't wait for the universe to give you a sign. You became the sign. That's why when people look at you now, they can't explain what they feel. It's not fear, it's recognition. They're not afraid of you. They're afraid for themselves, afraid of what they could have been if they had the patience to walk through fire without losing focus, because you didn't just survive your storm. You used it. You turned every broken plan into a blueprint, every rejection into redirection, every ending into a setup for something eternal. Now the prophecy is complete. The chaos that once mocked you is silent. The voices that doubted you are quiet. The same eyes that looked down on you now look up. And still, you say nothing. Because when your truth becomes too loud for words, silence is the only language left. That's the final stage. Not revenge, not recognition, but transcendence. The calm after evolution. You no longer need to explain, prove, or justify. You became what destiny itself consults before moving forward. So walk, not as the survivor, not as the chosen, but as the quiet storm that rewrote the meaning of control. You didn't just master the game. You became the board, and the world, it's still trying to catch up to your shadow.